Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Jaya Jai Om Srimad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stoka Srimad His Divine Graces Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON Samsthapakaracharya save the whole world with Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vāyur. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet nashtaprayeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistike. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation. Chapter 10, Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Text number 20. Nāsike nirabhidyetām. Nāsike nirabhidyetām. Nāsike nirabhidyetām. Dodhūyati nabhasvati. Dodhūyati nabhasvati. Dodhūyati nabhasvati. Tatra vāyur gandha-vaho. Tatra vāyur gandha-vaho. Tatra vāyur gandha-vaho. Ghrāno nasi jighr ghrāno nasi jighr ghrāno nasi jighr nāsike nirabhidyetām. Dodhūyati nabhasvati. Tatra vāyur gandha-vaho. Nasi jighr ghrāno nasi jighr nāsike nirabhidyetām. Dodhūyati nabhasvati. Tatra vāyur gandha-vaho. Ghrāno nasi jighr nāsike nirabhidyetām. Dodhūyati nabhasvati. nāsike nirabhidyetām, dodhūyati nabhasvati, tatra vāyur gandha-vaho, ghrāno nasi jighr, nāsike nirabhidyetām, dodhūyati nabhasvati, tatra vāyur gandha-vaho, ghrāno nasi jighr, nāsike nirabhidyetām, dodhūyati nabhasvati, tatra vāyur gandha-vaho, ghrāno nasi jighr. Nāsike, in the nostrils, nirabhidyetām, being developed, dodhūyati, rapidly blowing, nabhasvati, air respiration, tatra, thereupon, vāyur, air, gandha-vaho, smelling odor, ghrān, sense of smell, nasi, in the nose, jighr, desiring to smell odors. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostril and respiration were generated. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifested. Please repeat this translation. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were generated, the nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifested. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The nasal instrument, odor, and the controlling deity air, smelling, etc., all became manifested simultaneously when the Lord desired to smell. The Vedic mantras confirm this statement in the Upanishad statement that everything is first desired by the Supreme before the subordinate living entity can act upon it. The living entity can see only when the Lord sees. The living entity can smell when the Lord smells, and so on. The idea is that the living entity cannot do anything independently. He can simply think of doing something independently, but he cannot act independently. This independence in thinking is there by the grace of the Lord, but the thinking can be given shape by the grace of the Lord, and therefore the common saying is that man proposes and God disposes. The whole explanation is on the subject of the absolute dependence of the living entities and absolute independence of the Supreme Lord. Less intelligent persons claiming to be on an equal level with God must first prove themselves to be absolute and independent, and they must substantiate their claim to being one with God. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prajamine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurabhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this chapter is describing the development of the different senses and sense objects and controlling beings of the various living entities. As I have explained before, this body is a machine, and this machine has got certain facilities. Each one of us, as spirit soul, we are different from this machine. But we think in terms of I am this machine or I am this body. That's how we think. And because the body has got senses, we think that I am free to use my senses as I like to use them. When I want to smell something, I can smell. But we have experience. When you got a very bad cold, your power of smelling is temporarily lost. When there is no air which carries aroma, which carries smell, then you cannot smell. If the air stops blowing, then you cannot smell. The air is the carrier for smell. So here it is explained, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, then everything simultaneously became manifest. The smelling instrument, the air carrying the smell, the deity controlling the air, and respiration. See, there is a mechanism for you to take the air inside and then exhale the other type of air. So respiration is also taken for granted. Sometimes when this body does not work properly, respiration becomes very difficult. So this whole body and its mechanism is actually given to us by the grace of the Supreme Lord, Supreme Purusha, the Supreme Person. By His mercy, we have got this entire machine. And only by His mercy will it work to facilitate our sense activities. Jai Krishna. The sense activities cannot be performed without the mercy of the Lord. In the Upanishads it is described, everything is first desired by the Supreme, and then only the subordinate living being can act upon it. If I desire to see something, then the Lord has to see first, and then only I can see. Otherwise I cannot see. How does it work? Actually, the Lord is seated as Paramatma in our heart. Each person's heart is seated as Paramatma. And He is very, 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 very active. He is active 24/7, as they say. All the time He is active. He is sanctioning every single desire of the living entity. I desire to see, then the Lord has to sanction my seeing, and then only I can see. But this sanctioning is not done by the Lord like some kind of, we may think, some kind of manager who's sitting and authorizing, signing. Some subordinate wants to get some permission. No. It happens automatically, so to speak, by the higher arrangement of the Lord. That's why the arrangement is that there is a controlling deity and there is the living entity and there is the arrangement of the air, of the odor or smell, of the nose, working of the instrument called nose, the blowing of the air, the carrying of the aroma in the air. All this is regulated, controlled. You see? Which means to say that each one of us as living being, we are dependent. And our dependence is called absolute dependence. Absolute dependence means always dependent. Not that sometimes I depend, sometimes I don't depend. No. Always dependent. And the Supreme Lord is absolutely independent. He is never dependent. He is always independent. So this distinction between God and ourselves, each one of us, always exists, eternally exists. Some people think that when we become liberated, then we become one with God, and then we are independent like God. But that is not true. We may desire to become one with God, or we may desire to become independent, but our position of dependence on God always remains. Even when we become liberated, we are dependent. Of course, when we become liberated, we are freed from this bodily engagement. When we have a spiritual form, that spiritual form does not have the limitations of this material body. But still, even in the spiritual form, we are dependent on God. And those who fail to acknowledge the dependence on God, thinking themselves independent, their existence is in a different level. See, there are three kinds of existences. One is existence in the material world, where we are controlled by the agent of God, Maya. And then existence in the spiritual world in association with God as devotees, where also we are controlled by God through His internal energy. Through His internal energy. That is the position of the devotees, pure devotees. Controlled by God but through His internal energy. Control of love. And there is a third state of existence where one has become liberated because of severe austerities but does not accept devotional service and therefore remains in a state of existence called Brahman existence, where there is no spiritual form that is realized, neither there is material body, limitation of the material body or the material energy. So in such a state, which is a temporary state, one is thinking that he is completely liberated, but he is not liberated. This is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Ye anye aravindaksha vimuktamaninaha. Those who are thinking themselves vimuktamaninaha, thinking themselves liberated, but they are averse to devotional service. They are averse to they are against devotional service. They don't surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They don't render devotional service to God. And such persons are described as avishuddha buddhaya. Their intelligence is not purified. Their intelligence is polluted, is faulty. Because they are thinking themselves liberated while actually they are not liberated. Why? Because it says, Aruhya krichrena param padam tataha patantyadho anadruta yushmadangraya. Aruhya krichrena, with great difficulty, they elevate themselves beyond the platform of the three gunas, beyond this material existence. They elevate themselves to the spiritual platform. But they are unable to remain on the spiritual platform because they are averse to devotional service. Anadruta yushmananda, they neglect to surrender to the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, this is like an in-between state. Neither they are able to enter the spiritual world, spiritual planets, nor they are desirous of staying in the material world. So what is their position? Somewhere in between. Just like somebody may go, to give an example, an analogous example, somebody may go away from the earth in a, let's say, a space capsule. Get out of the earth. Oh, I don't want to stay here. Where do you want to go? Oh, I want to go into outer space. Outside the earth. I want to go outside the earth. Okay. So you can go outside the earth in a space capsule, but your space capsule has to land somewhere in some planet. You cannot be hanging in the air forever. Like that, a person who wants to get out of this material existence has to take shelter of one of these spiritual planets, Vaikuntha Loka. We cannot be without shelter. So if we fail to take shelter of one of the Vaikuntha planets, then we have to come back to this material world. For some time we may remain in between the material world and the spiritual world, in the spiritual sky. In Brahman Jyoti, sometime we may remain. But that cannot be an eternal existence. Not possible. Eternal existence is take shelter either of the spiritual planet or you have to come to the material planet. You cannot remain in between for an indefinite length of time. That's not possible. So, people who claim or think I have become one with God but have not taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Anadhuta Yushmadandra. That means they are not devotees, they are non-devotees. But still, they are interested in liberation, they are interested in getting out of this material existence. They don't want to be in this material world. They don't want to be conditioned by this body. They don't want to be under the influence of the gunas. So, what is their position? This is what the Bhagavatam explains. This is not understood by such people who don't study the Srimad Bhagavatam, who don't take to devotional service, who don't follow the parampara system of understanding the scriptures. Such people, their destination is actually that temporarily they may get out of this material existence, but they come back to material world after a little time. They come back to the material world. They cannot remain. There is the same example. In a space capsule, somebody goes out of the earth into outer space, but they don't land on some planet, then they have to come back to the earth planet. They cannot remain in outer space forever. That is not possible. So, the scriptures say that if you want to get out of this material existence, then you take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. Become his devotee. And Krishna, in very simple words in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Manmana bhavamat bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Mamekam sharanam braja. Take shelter of me, surrender to me, become my devotee, think of me, offer your respects to me, worship me. So all this indicates devotional service, bhakti. And that's the only way, and there's no other way, if you want to get out of this material. So, the two kinds of people in this world, if you may say, are one category of people who try to make some adjustment and live here comfortably. They are materialistic persons who don't realize the temporary nature of material existence. And the other category of spiritualists who don't take to devotional service but still are interested in liberation, in spiritual existence, but don't take to devotional service. So they are the impersonalists. So both these categories of persons actually remain in material existence. They cannot get out of material existence. Only the devotees who take to devotional service under the shelter of this lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of God. Only such devotees can get out of material existence and attain eternal shelter in the spiritual planet of the Supreme Personality of God. Yat gatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. So it's very, very clear if you study the Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, these verses are explaining, as Prabhupada says in the purport, the eternal dependence of the living entities and the eternal independence of the Supreme Lord. This is an eternal fact. And how much ever one may try to make it otherwise, it doesn't work. So even while we are in this body, we should become wise, and in order to actually use this body or perform sense activities, we have to learn how to depend on the Supreme Lord. Learn dependence on the Supreme Lord, because unless the Lord sanctions or unless the Lord sees, we cannot see. Unless the Lord smells, we cannot smell. So we may have a desire to see or smell or touch or whatever, but we are dependent on the Lord. So that dependence on the Lord is made possible by devotional service. So if we engage in devotional service, then we are able to properly perform our sense activities. We'll never be baffled when we have to do some sense activities. Everything will be perfect when we perform devotional service and learn to depend on Krishna. So that dependence on Krishna is possible by training, education. Education is studying the scriptures, beginning with the Bhagavad Gita. And training is the training in devotional service, how to do devotional service. So by learning, by training, getting trained up in devotional service, by learning about the principles of devotional service and getting trained in performing devotional service, we can nicely perform all our sense activities. Otherwise, it's a struggle for existence. This sense activities in this material world is a struggle for existence. And people are many times puzzled as to what is going on, what is happening. Even the doctors of medical science, in medical science also, they are unable to find out so many different causes for different malfunctioning of different senses. There's like so much of advancement they are making in medical science, but they don't know what is the ultimate cause of some blindness, or what is the ultimate cause of some person not able to smell, or not able to speak, or not able to hear. They don't know. Whatever the arrangement, that is one aspect of the ability to perform sense activities. But higher than that is the control, especially the arrangement of the controlling deity, and above the controlling deity, the ultimate control of the Supreme Lord. So this has to be taken into account before somebody actually tries to understand how this mechanism is working. So this chapter, this 10th chapter of the second canto explains in terms of the 10th topic, the ashraya, the ultimate shelter of everyone and everything in this world is the Supreme Lord, who actually is the support, is the basis for all our activities, for all our senses, for all our sense activities, sense objects, everything. We are dependent, and that's why he is called ashraya, or the ultimate shelter. And we are all ashrita. We are always sheltered by him. Eternally we are sheltered by him. So accepting this, understanding this, and acting according to this understanding is the perfection of the human form of life. Okay, I'll stop here. Any questions? Please stop. गंधराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्री प्रभुपाद की।